my name is Shalon, and I'm here to help you find your next favorite book and your next favorite author. And I'm here with Neena Viel, and we are going to be talking about I'll Watch Your Baby. I had an opportunity to read this, and there aren't too many books that actually scare me. But this one did. I was like, I need some lights on.
All right, we got the job done.
For certain sections. But I would love to start with, what would folks be surprised by about your author origin story?
Let's see. Well, probably, I think a lot of horror writers get this, where they're like in person. They're like, wow, you're so bubbly, you're so fun. You must only write beautiful things. And I'm like,
A romance or two or something.
That's correct. And as a baby writer, like in my formative years, I was writing a lot as like a child, and when I review that, there are a lot of imaginary boyfriends, right? Like I was definitely doing a lot of exploring. I'm like, I want to read the kinds of stories that we get now in fantasy, but we didn't, right? When I was a kid, of like little girls, little black girls, riding dragons, falling in love. But then I grew up and I got a boyfriend, and I was like, y'all are full of lies. This is a horror story, and that's the rest of my life.
Especially with the wrong one.
Absolutely.
Definitely things can escalate quickly. How has your background or experiences shaped the type of horror stories that you enjoy writing?
Yeah, I feel like we're still really just scratching the surface of what horror looks like for people of color. And there are so many unique flavors of horror that it can be hard to even scarcely think about. I could spend the rest of my career doing this and feel like I'm only scratching the surface of my own personal fear. But yeah, I grew up, very low income, raised by a single mom. I'm one of four. They're all boys except for me, which is what my first book, Listen to Your Sister, is about, which is, the horror of family, the horror of the things that we do to each other, the way that we fail to support each other, the horror of society, just how different everything looks through a Black lens, particularly a Black female lens.
Yeah, and what about horror do you gravitate to most? Because you could explore that in a variety of ways, and it doesn't necessarily have to include horror elements or anything like that. But what about horror do you enjoy most?
What I think I love about horror is that there really are no rules or expectations. A person picking up a horror novel knows there might not be a happy ending at the end.
Yes.
Unlike other genres where there are just certain reader expectations of what's going to happen. So for me as a writer, I find that very freeing, because I'm like, when I'm writing, I'm like, so everything's on the table. Literally every option is on the table here,
Even some supernatural happenings.
Supernatural happenings are on the table, okay? Yes. Anything can happen to anyone at any time, and I find that, really, really exciting. And there's something that is very freeing about exploring those taboos. As you know, Black women, we completely hold it down in our communities, and our schools, and our workplaces. We lead excellence in academia and really any career profession that you could think of. But that means that there's also not a lot of room for us to make mistakes. And so while I am so thrilled for all y'all watching who are so talented and really, leading it, what I'm doing, my corner of the world, I'm gonna write fuck ups, okay? That's what I'm trying to do, is write us, write the imperfections in the ways in which, when a Black woman decides that she's not gonna be in the supportive role anymore, what does that look like for everyone else? It's not great for them.
There's definitely consequences to doing what you want.
Yeah.
You want it outside of societal expectations. And that definitely comes up in I'll Watch Your Baby. As we're thinking about Lottie and just the perception of the welfare queen and what we think of that when we hear those words, but then what the actual reality is. If we look at the statistics for public assistance,
Absolutely.
It's not the image that comes to folks' minds. Why did you think that original welfare queen was like a great vehicle for a horror novel?
Yeah, wonderful question. So first you need to know I love Candyman, okay? I watched Candyman so young, and when I watched it, it's one of those things where I was like, I think I thought he was, Tony Todd is just a beautiful man, but I didn't know that that's what was going on. I was like, all I know is I'm mesmerized. But I always was like, wow, I really want to write anti-hero. I want to write Candyman, but a woman. I feel like Black women, we can also be scary, I want to write something like that. And so, especially after my debut novel, Listen to Your Sister, which involves, a really messy trio of siblings, but they all have fundamentally good hearts. They make mistakes, but you don't doubt that they care about each other. And after writing those protagonists, which are a lot more relatable and lovable, I finished that and was like, I'm trying to write a baddie, is what I'm trying to do next. I want to write the opposite of that. And so horror just seemed like such a great vehicle because the welfare queen stereotype is a ghost in our country. It is a stereotype. And when you learn more about the woman who inspired this label, you'll find that she's completely atypical from any other woman of her generation, any other woman now. So it really doesn't make sense that as Black women, we are still yoked, kind of under the mantle of this particular stereotype. And like you said, it doesn't matter how often you review the statistics with people. It doesn't really matter how often you put the information into context or correct this misinformation. It's just a segment of the population that will continue to believe into infinity that Black women are just sort of leeches of society, popping out kids for government income. And, when you look at it from a historical perspective, we look to the past to shed light on how we got here. But when the case of the welfare queen, we look to the past and all I had was more question marks. So it's just question marks all the way down, and I feel that there is still a question here of even the basic premise of how profitable would it actually be to live that way? Because now I don't have kids. Do you have kids?
No.
Okay, great. Has a parent ever told you in the entirety of your life, girl, you trying to make some real money? You need to have a kid. Have 6 kids. You're going to be rolling in it. Things you've never heard.
And I would have to have kids. I think there's a stuff in there that,
No, absolutely. But I'm like, kids are expensive. Yeah. It's not financially feasible to, I'm like, the government has never been generous and kids cost more money than almost anything else you could possibly do. And so even just the basic fallacy, we're starting, mistake number 1 is assuming that anybody is able to live a rich lifestyle doing this. Even the original welfare queen, people are like, the evidence really shows that she was more in bed with child trafficking than she was physically birthing and, using her own kids.
Yeah. And that definitely comes up in Lottie's story. And I just have to say, I very much enjoyed Lottie. I enjoyed how you wove humor into her story. She has her wig, she has her furs, and I'm probably paraphrasing it wrong, but there's a line in there where she says, "All I want is everything."
Yes.
Yes. Why can I not have everything that I want exactly the way that I want it? Which runs into her story. I would love to know how you crafted her, and then the counterbalance of Bless, who is someone who is just looking and searching for a connection, and that's what her motivation is, as opposed to Lottie is I want the things that I feel like I deserve and I should have.
Yeah, absolutely. So for listeners who aren't very familiar with the premise of the book, I'll Watch Your Baby is a supernatural retelling of America's most notorious welfare queen. I make it a ghost story. And there are 2 protagonists, antagonists, whatever you want to call them, anti-heroes acted up, 2 Black women acted up for the entirety of these pages is what's happening here. And Lottie, of course, was inspired by Linda Taylor, the welfare queen, and she's just in real life. I have problems with the methodology, of course. I don't think she was great, on paper, but she just really hit those notes of an antagonist that you kind of love to hate, in that there are certain moments of her story that I couldn't help but find it so compelling, yes, she maybe was a murderer, not great. Yes, she was possibly maybe kidnapping some children. Yes, she has a lot of missing having ex-husbands. We don't need to explore that too much, you know, is what I think. But there are also these moments where, like you said, she absolutely refuses to let go of anything in her hand. You know, there's a scene in her real life where she hires like one of the best civil rights attorneys, and you know, they go to court, and he tells her before court, he's like, you know, the public has this very particular image of you, you know, with the hair, with the braids, with the fit, you know, we need to like switch it up. You need to like dress a little bit more conservative, you know? And she basically is like, you're going to have to pry it out of my cold dead hands, because I'm not about to show up to court looking a mess, you know? In any photo you see her, she's like head to toe coordinated. You know, you got to admire somebody with that kind of spirit. But yeah, that was my inspiration for Lottie, was this woman who really, because of the way that she was raised, because of her past, sees children, you know, as commodities, who is this anti-hero, who is putting herself first and foremost in almost any situation. It's not a guarantee that she's going to care about other people or prioritize their happiness. In fact, she only has kind of one relationship anchoring her, and even she doesn't fully understand, you know, the nature of that friendship and the ways in which it's enriching her. And so my starting point for her, and this is my question for the real Linda Taylor as well, is this the kind of woman that is able like to grow and like have any kind of like healthy connection? And what kind of seismic, crazy sequence of activities would have to happen to make somebody like that change? And Bless is very much in the opposite side of the coin. She's a lot younger. Like you said, she's still searching. When I was writing them, I thought a lot in terms of contrast of like, okay, Lottie's wearing fur. She wearing flannel, y'all. She wearing flannel. She don't have a dog, but she might have some dog hair on her. You know, that's the kind of, you know, somebody is leading the group, somebody is in charge and doesn't care about anyone's opinions. Bless is thrilled to just be in the group, you know. But both of them, and the thing I think they have in common is when it comes to the very short list of people they care about, they will do absolutely anything, whether that crosses ethical, legal boundaries or not.
And part of what is explored in the novel is just like what that perception is like, because if they were white men who were potentially behaving badly or putting themselves first, that's a different perception.
It's a different perception.
If it's a woman, let alone black women, who are going against, you know, laws and regulations. Can you talk a little bit about why you also wanted to include that element as well? Because like they're definitely behaving badly, but then there's moments where Lottie is recognizing how she's perceived, and she's just like, okay, anyway, like I'm still gonna go after what I want.
Yeah, this was one of the things that had me the most hot and bothered throughout the whole writing process and research process for this book is I thought if I were the real life welfare queen, or if I were a black woman living at any time in history, and especially now, you just would have to think, so we're like in a straight up clown world is like where we're at. And it's been clowns for a long time now. And the thing that kind of makes me think that is, so in the case of Linda Taylor, the ubiquitous welfare queen, this is somebody who again is suspected of murder, who's suspected of child abuse, child trafficking, all of these things that we all agree as a society are way worse than fraud. But then when you look at the nonstop media coverage in the way that black women are still discussed in the media today, there is still that fixation on what are we wearing? What does our purse look like? What does our nails look like? You cannot tell somebody's life story from these details, you know, but we're still kind of getting tarred by those expectations. And I just thought, like, what would it be like to actually be, in Linda Taylor's case, to have been somebody that her family actually harmed, right? To have been an actual victim. You know, I've read many accounts of people who were very hurt by the actual crimes that she did, but there's absolutely no sense of justice or reconciliation because there was this mad fervor to only pursue the welfare fraud part. And they only pursued the welfare fraud part politically. There was an agenda here, and that's not me being like, it's all a conspiracy. I mean, this is like a documented, very elaborately, extensively researched thing. There was a plan afoot at that time. A decision was made politically from the Reagan administration to only pursue her in terms of the welfare fraud and to ignore all the other crimes under the table, because if she wasn't doing the welfare fraud, that she couldn't be like you. She couldn't be like you or me, you know? She can't be every woman, if we were aware of the true gravity. And so that was just so frustrating. It's like, but there are actual victims, right? There are actually things she could have been called to task for, and none of that ever happened because they're like, welfare fraud. And it's clear that's not really just about the fraud. We've seen much larger fraud on a scale, much larger scale than what she did.
Great harm, if we were to compare.
If we were to compare, which means there's something else motivating those decisions.
Yes, because like you mentioned, going after the financial aspect and that being the focus when potentially children were harmed, it also shows like, what do folks value as far as like, do we actually value children? And then if the children that she potentially was harming, if they were Black children, poor children, things like that, like are they seen as valuable as opposed to just the alleged money that she's been collecting? I wanted to go back to what you mentioned about, like, is there opportunity for growth? Because like you mentioned, in Linda's story and then Lottie's story, they both experienced harm and potentially abuse when they were younger, and that impacts like their future decisions. And that also is something that comes up in Bless's story as well. So just thinking through just Black people generally and just like the cycle of harm that has happened. I'm wondering within this story, is there an opportunity for growth beyond that, especially when you're already not seen as a full person or respected, in the general public?
That's a wonderful question. And I'm like, I'm going to leave it to more talented people to go on and do that. No, is there an opportunity for growth and change in a larger perspective? I think absolutely yes. And the characters in this story, though, what was really cathartic to me was they are certainly changing, but they're not necessarily changing in a way that is going to be more acceptable to society at large, right? Regardless of what they do, still a horror story, folks, so let's not lose that anchor. But do I think that they can change? I mean, I think I want to leave it to the readers for these characters specifically. I want to ask the readers, like, this is something I struggled with too, of what does change look like? Is this person capable? It's hard to go from seeing somebody as an object to like a real person. So I think it's ultimately up to the readers if Lottie and Bless kind of succeeded. But I do think they're on certain opposite journeys when it comes to finding their voice. And I mean, there's a sliver of that, of course, that's still true to real life. It's all of our responsibilities to, regardless of what we experience. And it can be, certainly had some not great experiences in my childhood as well. And in my case, those sorts of traumas certainly inform my sense of fear in the ways that I interact with the world. And it's also important to kind of take a step outside of my body and look at the woman that I want to be. And just know I'm not going to problem solve by getting ghosts involved in real life. Not going to be my strategy.
It just gives you an opportunity to like look at things in a different perspective when you do also, because like you mentioned, there are supernatural happenings that are woven through the book that when you're reading it, you understand Lottie and Bless a little bit more as well. And I'll leave it at that. You'll have to read it. You'll have to read it to actually see how that all comes together. But I would love to know, what are some of those like supernatural or horror elements that you wanted to make sure to include based on how you wanted to tell their stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of people tell me, they're like, well, I don't like horror, I'm not into it. And, but they will watch true crime. And if that's you listening, then I have some questions for you.
That's very close to the line.
Very close to the line.
Like a half a step.
I could not even get through the Jeffrey Dahmer show. I was like, this is too much for me. They're like, I can't deal with horror, but I will watch a real story about real women being put in dumpsters, and I'll watch 12 hours of that.
From my neighborhood.
I'm like, that's way scarier to me. So, but you know what? I'm not about to mess with the true crime girlies because I don't want them coming at me with that energy.
They can like their thing.
But for me, yeah, I feel like the horror to me that's scary is just horror that's kind of coming out of real life. It's coming from a place of not really understanding the past or the current circumstances, it's horror that is kind of manifesting in these creepier, crawlier details, and so it's hard to do this without spoilers,
right.
But what I can say is I had a lot of fun, both visually and, just creatively picturing, what these horror elements look like to give the reader those like, oh crap moments,
yes.
Something that I work really hard on. And when it comes to insects, I do think, I found an insect that, doesn't really get a lot of attention in the community as of now, but maybe that will change after this book.
Plenty of attention. I was hearing things. I was like, as I was reading, I was like, wait a minute, hold on, what's going on? Because your writing is so vivid. So, like, you feel like you are in that mansion, or you feel like you're in those homes and things like that. So like you're a part of the story.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And one little backstory detail that you might appreciate is, so when I was revising, like rewriting, what last summer, however these timelines work, my husband and I had gone on a little trip and we did not empty the compost in the kitchen before we left, just to oversight. So I came back to a full-blown fruit fly infestation, and y'all know it's like impossible to get rid of those guys. I'm following all the steps. I have bottles of apple cider vinegar in the cans all over the place. I have, at one point I must have had 3 to 4 traps in every room of my house, right? I'm like, these guys, but they breed so fast. So I like to write at night, because it's more spooky.
Yes,
so
it gives you the vibe.
Gives you the vibe, right? I'm lighting that candle, I'm writing, but because of the infestation, while I'm writing, there's literally fruit flies crawling. They're attracted to the light. And so just all over my screen, I'm like, psh, 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 because I actively could not see the words because there were so many flies. and I
yes, that comes through in the story. And that's all I'll say about that. How do you want readers to feel after reading I'll Watch Your Baby?
Oh, let's see. I want readers to feel a little bit of a catharsis, I think. For me, like I said earlier, it's like Black women in fiction, it's like there are still some rules and we still have to behave so well. We're great friends, luckily we're falling in love more,
The Claire Huxtable effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. We still behave so well. And I wanted to write the opposite of that, where even with great clarity, it doesn't mean that anyone's going to suddenly become a good girl. I want you to imagine what these characters are going to do next. And feel a certain level of excitement about that, that there are these characters that are completely breaking the mold of appropriate behavior, and they're going to look super good while they're doing it, okay? We're going to keep the outfits fresh. And I think I want readers to also feel a little like upset around, there are many factors around this book that I'm writing it factually in some places of this is kind of factually what happened, factually how this was viewed, kind of on the world stage. And that made me so frustrated, while I was researching. And, I was definitely writing from a place of just, I had this combative attitude, of like, let me show you what an actual welfare queen would look like according to you, and to see that this is not somebody in real life that is like anyone else,
Right. Definitely. Linda Taylor and Lottie are singular people.
Absolutely.
With singular thought processes, missions, and goals. So for Linda to have been used as a stereotype for a whole group of people is absurd. Because there's just, that definitely is not possible.
I do want my readers also to join me in having an attitude about certain factors when we get to the end there. Like I said, so many of these premises, why are we supposed to feel anybody who requires aid for their families or for their children should absolutely not feel a sense of shame about that. Right. We should be benefiting from a system that we pay into into and have paid into for an extremely long time. And like I said, there are other frauds. It's just that there's something that's extremely sticky about Black women and this idea. I did lots of research on welfare fraud and what that all looks like. So, and I partially grew up in Arkansas, so I like to say, I'm from the South sometimes, And in 2020, it was like 77 million, a group of like organized individuals, including one person who was already wealthy and is like a retired NFL player. 77 million, and they did things like build luxury volleyball courts, and all that. And then I'm like, there were really very little repercussions for that. And we're not moving forward. You've never heard a policy discussion where they're like, and you know who we can't trust? Well, welfare money is white men named Brett.
Right.
You know what? They ain't trustworthy. They ain't trustworthy.
Exactly.
We
don't have caricatures of them running around in the newspaper and these political
Absolutely not. No, they do as much fraud. They do more fraud than really, it's the Bretts of the world acting up more than anyone else.
Yes.
But they still get to retain this really pristine image. Well, that Black women we just do not get. We're on a tightrope constantly over a yawning abyss of expectations. And so I was mad about it. I was mad about researching it. I was mad about it while I was writing. I'm mad about it at the end, and y'all can all be mad about it with me.
Yes, definitely. One last question. If you just think about the work that you're putting out into the world holistically, so I'll Watch Your Baby, Listen to Your Sister, and then anything you might be working on.
Yeah.
If you overheard a reader raving about your work, what 3 words would you want to hear them say?
Oh, that's really tough. Original, funny, and I don't know, thrilling. Hard to think. I guess what I want my readers to feel is, as you can tell just from 2 seconds of conversation with me, I'm really excited about horror ideas, but I love jokes. I think a sense of humor is really important, and I think it really helps when you weave that in and out. And so I also want my readers to have a good time, and I really value that sense of freshness a lot in my work. I love, obviously, can't be writer unless you also are very passionate about reading.
Yes.
But I have grown to start to feel more impatient with. There's something happening in publishing where it feels like basically the same book is coming out again and again, just like slightly repackaged, like tweaked like a little bit,
A character is now in a forest instead of a Glen, but it's basically the same thing.
Absolutely. And there are certain tropes, there's going to be certain expectations that are reinterpreted, and that's, really not the issue. But I want readers to know that with each book that I write, I'm going to be taking on something completely different. This book is so different than my first one. My third book is so different than this one, and so I want readers to know that, with each of my works, I'm just going to continue to push myself, to push those boundaries, and find all new things to be mad as hell about, and also laugh about forevermore.
Yes. Is there anything you can share about your third book?
Yeah. So my third book is titled The Trail Provides. Like I told you, I went to school in Arkansas, and so I like to call it my Arkansas book. My current obsession right now, once I got done with being obsessed about the welfare queen, my new obsession after that is, are you familiar with the Long Walk memoir?
No.
Okay, think about books like Wild by Cheryl Strayed, it's like there's such an appetite for this whole genre of books that involve people who take on, the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail or some other long walk. They have a big life event happen, such as the loss of a parent or divorce or some other inner crisis, and their thought process is like, how I'm gonna handle that? I'm gonna go walk 1,000 miles perhaps, and we're gonna work it out and contemplate. We're gonna work it out. We're gonna be healed by nature. We're gonna go on this adventure. And if you're doing that walk, I am not knocking you. I'm fascinated. My cardio is poor, so I'm not gonna be but I'm very interested in that. And I mean, this is also kind of another area of like outdoor enthusiasm where you don't see a ton of people of color. A lot of outdoor hobbies do require, certain knowledge, certain skills, certain tools in order to feel comfortable doing that. But the bottom line is the experience of being in remote environmental landscapes is just completely different if you are a Black woman in particular. And so more power to y'all out there. Not me though, I'm staying home. But yeah, The Trail Provides is about a young Black woman who, after a negative experience on her college campus, she's like, this is my time. I'm also gonna go back to the earth and find myself and be soothed by nature. She takes on the Ozark Highland Trail, so she's walking through rural Arkansas. And so her experience is maybe gonna be a little bit different than some of these memoirs.
And you're a horror writer, so we can expect it will be very different.
It will be very different, absolutely.
But some activities happening throughout the walk.
I like to say though, the elements I'm playing with in that book are, people don't think Black folks can be rednecks, and I say nay. To that. So my Black redneck girlie, she gonna go on her long walk with her backpack, and we're gonna see how much healing she finds in nature.
Okay, well, I'm excited for that one. And excited for more folks to read I'll Watch Your Baby. And thank you so much for chatting with me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. And thank you so much for everything that you do to help boost all of our voices and get these books out to readers. Shalon is the best. This is a heart just for you.
Thank you.